The suitcase lay open on our bed like a mouthful of lies. I stood in the doorway, whiskey in hand, watching my wife Jenna pack for what she called her strategic planning retreat. The irony wasn't lost on me. There was definitely strategy involved, just not the corporate kind she claimed. "Luke, have you seen my blue bikini?" she called from the bathroom, her voice carrying that particular note of forced casualness I'd grown to recognize over our 7 years of marriage. "Strategy session requires swimwear now?" I asked, taking a sip of bourbon and letting the burn match the one in my chest. She emerged with an armload of resort wear that would make a Vegas showgirl jealous. "The hotel has a spa. Team building, you know how it is?" Another lie, delivered with the same bright smile she used on clients. "I'm a civil engineer. I build bridges, design foundations, calculate load-bearing capacities. My world runs on precision, on truth that can be measured and verified. Watching Jenna stuff lingerie into a bag for a work retreat was like watching someone try to balance a skyscraper on a toothpick. The math just didn't add up." "Darren will be there, I assume?" I kept my voice neutral, engineering calm. "Of course. He's the regional VP. This whole thing was his idea." She folded a black negligee with the care of someone handling evidence, which, in a way, she was. Darren Tate, 42 years old, divorced twice, drove a BMW that cost more than most people's annual salary. He had the kind of aggressive charm that worked on ambitious marketing executives like my wife. The kind of man who saw other people's marriages as just another market to penetrate. "When do you fly out?" I asked, though I already knew. I'd seen the confirmation email she'd forgotten to delete from our shared laptop. "Tomorrow morning, early flight." She zipped the suitcase shut with finality. "I'll probably be exhausted when I get back Sunday. This kind of intensive planning really drains you." I nodded, playing the role of the understanding husband. "I'm sure it does." She kissed me goodbye the next morning, her lips tasting like guilt and expensive lip gloss. I watched from our front window as she loaded her suitcase into the Uber, waving like she was heading off to save the company instead of destroy our marriage. My neighbor, Frank Krantz, was watering his lawn with the dedication of a man who had nothing better to do since retirement. Former security guard, current neighborhood watchman, Frank noticed everything and forgot nothing. "Jenna heading out of town?" he called over. "Work retreat," I replied. Frank's expression suggested he found that about as believable as I did, but he just nodded and went back to drowning his grass. I spent that weekend alone, but not idle. I'm methodical by nature. You have to be when you're responsible for making sure buildings don't fall down. So I started building something myself, a foundation of facts. The credit card statements were enlightening. Spa treatments, expensive dinners, hotel charges that didn't match any business trips I knew about. Our joint account showed a pattern of withdrawals that coincided perfectly with Darren's travel schedule. Her laptop, which she'd left behind in her hurry, was a goldmine of carelessness. Text messages synced from her phone painted a picture that would make a divorce attorney weep with joy. Not tears of sadness, tears of billable hours. "Can't wait to see you at the resort," one message read. "This time we won't have to sneak around." "Luke suspects nothing," read another. "He's too buried in his blueprints to notice real life." That last one stung, mainly because it was probably true. I had been buried in work, trusting my wife while she excavated our marriage from beneath me. But she was wrong about one thing. I noticed everything now. Sunday evening, she returned with a tan that spoke of poolside lounging rather than conference room strategizing. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages she tried to hide, and she had that particular glow that comes from getting away with something. "How was the retreat?" I asked over dinner. "Productive, really productive. Darren has some amazing ideas for the next quarter." She couldn't quite meet my eyes when she said his name. "I'm sure he does." For the next 6 months, I played the part of the oblivious husband while quietly documenting every lie, every secret meeting, every fabricated business trip. I was building a case the way I built bridges, with careful planning, solid materials, and an eye towards something that would last. My brother Doug thought I was losing my mind. "Just confront her," he said over beers at Murphy's Tavern. "Tell her you know." Doug was a mechanic, a good one, but he approached problems with a wrench instead of a blueprint. Sometimes you needed to tear an engine apart to fix it, but sometimes, if you were patient, you could let the engine tear itself apart. "What's the rush?" I asked him. "She's not going anywhere." But I was wrong about that too. The end came at a company party in November, 6 months after that first retreat. Melissa Farrow, Jenna's best friend and fellow marketing executive, had too much wine and too little discretion. We were standing by the bar when she pulled out her phone to show me pictures from some corporate event. "Oh, This was from that amazing resort weekend in May, she said, swiping through photos. Jenna looked so happy. The picture that appeared on her screen was worth every moment of the previous 6 months. Jenna in a blue bikini, the same one she'd packed for her strategy session, lounging by a pool with Darren's arm around her waist, both of them laughing at some private joke, looking like honeymooners instead of colleagues. Melissa's wine-flushed face went pale as she realized what she'd shown me. "Luke, nice tan," I said, handing her phone back with a smile. She always photographs well. I walked away, leaving Melissa stammering explanations to empty air. Across the room, Jenna was talking to a group of clients, animated and confident. She had no idea that her best friend had just handed me the final piece of evidence I needed. That night, lying in bed next to my cheating wife, I stared at the ceiling and made my decision. I'd spent 6 months gathering intelligence. Now it was time to start construction on something special, a revenge that would be as carefully engineered as any bridge I'd ever built. The foundation was solid. The materials were tested and verified. All I needed now was the right moment to begin. I didn't have to wait long. 3 weeks after Melissa's wine-fueled revelation, Jenna surprised me with an idea that was so perfect, I almost wondered if she was doing it on purpose. "I've been thinking," she said over breakfast, buttering her toast with the same casual precision she used for lying. "Our anniversary is coming up next month. 8 years. 8 years of marriage that she'd spent the last year and a half systematically destroying." I sipped my coffee and waited for the pitch. "I was thinking we could do something special. Maybe get away somewhere nice." She paused, and I could practically hear the gears turning. "Actually, I know the perfect place. Remember that resort I went to for the strategy retreat? It was beautiful, really romantic." The audacity was breathtaking. She wanted to take me to the same place she'd been carrying on her affair, like some twisted victory lap. I had to admire the sheer boldness of it, even as it made my stomach turn. "Sounds expensive," I said, playing the practical husband. "We can afford it. Besides, when's the last time we did something just for us?" The irony in that statement was so thick you could pour it over pancakes. I pretended to consider it, taking my time with my eggs while she waited. "You know what? You're right. We should do something special." Her smile was radiant, the same one that had made me fall in love with her in college, back when it was genuine. "I'll make the reservations," she said, already reaching for her phone. "Actually, let me handle it. You've been working so hard lately." I stood up, kissing the top of her head. "Consider it my anniversary gift to you." If she only knew. That afternoon, I called the Lakeside Grand Resort. It was a 4-hour drive north, nestled on the shores of Lake Meridian like something out of a travel magazine, the kind of place that charged by the hour for what most hotels included for free. "I'd like to book the Honeymoon Suite for February 14th, I told the reservations clerk. "Certainly, sir. That's one of our most popular rooms." I bet it was, especially with regional VPs and their marketing directors. "I have a special request," I continued. "My wife stayed there recently for a business conference, and I'd like to surprise her with something that references that trip. Could you help me with that?" The clerk, whose name was Patricia, was delighted to help with such a romantic gesture. For an extra $200, she assured me that my surprise would be waiting at check-in. "What kind of surprise are we talking about, sir?" I'd been thinking about this for weeks, planning it with the same attention to detail I use for structural calculations. "I have some photos from her last visit. I'd like to have one professionally framed and waiting in our room when we arrive." "That sounds lovely, sir. Very thoughtful." Thoughtful. That was one word for it. The photo I selected was one of several I'd printed from Melissa's phone, using the high-resolution copies she'd unknowingly shared to the company cloud. Jenna and Darren by the pool, his arm around her, both of them looking like they'd won the lottery. I chose a beautiful silver frame, the kind you'd put on a mantle to commemorate special occasions, which, in a way, this was. While I was planning our anniversary surprise, I was also taking care of some practical matters. Our joint checking account, which had been hemorrhaging money for months thanks to Jenna's secret expenditures, suddenly developed some security concerns that required my immediate attention. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Hanson," the bank representative would tell her when she tried to use our credit cards. "There seems to be a hold on your account. You'll need to speak with your husband about authorizing any large purchases." I also had a conversation with Tina Maxwell, one of Jenna's coworkers, who'd grown tired of being asked to cover for my wife's extended lunch breaks and mysterious afternoon appointments. Tina was the kind of person who kept meticulous records, and she was more than happy to share some interesting discrepancies she'd noticed in Jenna's expense reports. "I probably shouldn't be telling you this," Tina said over coffee, "but some of these receipts don't add up. hotel charges on days when she was supposed to be in client meetings across town, spa treatments during work hours. I appreciate your concern, I told her. Jenna's been under a lot of stress lately. Tina nodded knowingly. Stress, that's one word for it. The week before our anniversary trip, I made one final preparation. I visited Darren's neighborhood, a collection of oversized houses that screamed new money and insecurity. His BMW sat in the driveway like a monument to his ego. I didn't do anything dramatic. I just wanted to see where he lived, to understand the life my wife was so eager to join. The house was impressive in the way that expensive things often are, all surface and no substance, like Darren himself. His neighbor was washing his car in the driveway next door, and we struck up a conversation about the neighborhood. Turned out Darren wasn't particularly popular with the locals. Too many late-night parties, too many different women coming and going, too little consideration for anyone else. Guy thinks he owns the whole street, the neighbor complained. Always revving that car at all hours, music too loud. Some of us have families, you know. I sympathized appropriately and filed the information away. You never knew when community relations might become important. The night before our anniversary trip, Jenna was practically vibrating with excitement. She'd packed enough clothes for a week, even though we were only staying 2 nights. Her suitcase looked like she was preparing for a photo shoot rather than a romantic getaway with her husband. I can't wait to show you this place, she said, zipping up her bag. The spa is incredible, and the restaurant has a view of the lake that's just breathtaking. You seem to remember it pretty well for a work conference. Well, we did have some downtime between sessions. She turned away to check her makeup in the mirror, missing the look on my face. Downtime. That was certainly one way to describe it. I made dinner reservations for tomorrow night, she continued. 7 o'clock at the main restaurant. I hope you brought something nice to wear. I brought my best suit, I assured her. The same one I'd worn to my father's funeral. Seemed appropriate for the occasion. That night, I lay awake listening to Jenna sleep beside me, her breathing deep and peaceful. She had no idea that tomorrow would be the last day of our marriage, at least in any meaningful sense. She was dreaming of her future with Darren, probably planning how to break the news to me gently, but I had my own plans for tomorrow. Plans that had been months in the making, carefully constructed and precisely timed. I'd built my career on creating things that could withstand enormous pressure without collapsing. Tomorrow, I was going to find out if my wife was built to the same standards. The drive to the resort was a masterpiece of marital theater. Jenna kept up a steady stream of cheerful chatter about the scenery, the weather, how excited she was to share this special place with me. I played my part, making appropriate responses while my mind ran through the final checklist. The lakeside Grand Resort emerged from the pine trees like something out of a fairy tale, all stone and timber and glass reflecting the winter sky. It was the kind of place that charged extra for everything, including the privilege of breathing their carefully conditioned air. Isn't it gorgeous? Jenna breathed as we pulled into the circular drive. Breathtaking, I agreed, though I was looking at her instead of the building. The valet who took our car was young and eager, the kind of kid who probably worked 3 jobs to pay for college. I tipped him well and made sure to remember his name, Tommy. In my experience, it paid to be nice to the people who handled your belongings. The lobby was all marble and mahogany, designed to make guests feel both pampered and slightly intimidated. A massive fireplace dominated one wall, while floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the frozen lake beyond. It was undeniably beautiful, and I could see why it appealed to people like Darren, who confused expensive with impressive. Good afternoon. The desk clerk greeted us with professional warmth. Checking in? Hanson, I said. Luke and Jenna Hanson. The clerk's fingers danced across her keyboard. Ah, yes, the Honeymoon Suite. Congratulations on your anniversary. Thank you, Jenna said, squeezing my arm. 8 wonderful years. If she only knew how wonderful the next few minutes were going to be. I have a note here about a special surprise, the clerk continued, reaching under the counter. Mr. Hanson, you wanted this, delivered at check-in? She handed me a wrapped package, rectangular and flat. The silver frame inside was even more beautiful than I'd remembered, and the photo looked crisp and professional. Jenna and Darren by the pool, captured in a moment of intimate laughter that told the whole story of their relationship. What's that? Jenna asked, her voice carrying the first note of uncertainty I'd heard all day. A little anniversary surprise, I said, handing her the package. Something to commemorate your last visit here. Her smile faltered slightly as she took the package, but she was still playing the role of the loving wife. Luke, you didn't have to... She stopped talking when she unwrapped the frame. The photo hit her like a physical blow, and I watched 8 years of marriage die in her eyes. Her face went through a fascinating series of expressions. Confusion, recognition, horror, and finally a kind of desperate calculation as she tried to figure out how to explain this away. "Luke, I can explain. I'm sure you can." I turned back to the desk clerk, who was trying very hard to pretend she hadn't noticed the sudden tension. "Are there any messages for us?" "No messages, sir, but I do have your room keys." She handed them over with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd seen plenty of domestic drama in luxury settings. Jenna was still staring at the photo, her face pale above her expensive winter coat. Other guests were starting to notice, and I could see her becoming aware of the attention. Nothing terrified my wife more than public embarrassment. "Should we head up to the room?" I suggested pleasantly. She nodded mutely, clutching the framed evidence of her betrayal like it might spontaneously combust if she held it tight enough. The elevator ride to the 4th floor was silent, except for the soft jazz playing through hidden speakers. Jenna kept looking at me like she was seeing a stranger, which was fair enough. The man she'd married would have been shouting by now, demanding explanations and apologies. But I wasn't that man anymore. I'd evolved. The honeymoon suite was everything the brochure had promised. King-size bed with a view of the lake, marble bathroom with a jetted tub, sitting area with a fireplace that probably cost more per night than most people spent on rent. It was the perfect setting for romance, or in our case, the perfect setting for a reckoning. I set our luggage down and walked to the window, looking out at the frozen lake. "Beautiful view. I can see why you enjoyed your time here." "Luke, please let me explain." Jenna's voice was small, nothing like the confident marketing executive who'd kissed me goodbye that morning. I turned to face her. She was still holding the photo, and I noticed her hands were shaking slightly. "Go ahead. I'm listening." "It's not what it looks like." "Really?" "Because it looks like you and your boss having a romantic getaway at a resort while telling me you were at a work conference." "It was a work conference. Darren and I, we were just what? Just accidentally fell into each other's arms by the pool, just happened to be wearing matching swimwear during a strategic planning session." She set the frame down on the dresser, face down like that would make it go away. "You don't understand. My job, the pressure I'm under, your job." I sat down in one of the expensive chairs, making myself comfortable. "Let's talk about your job. Specifically, let's talk about your expense reports." I pulled out my phone and opened the folder I'd been building for months. Screenshots, bank statements, credit card records, hotel receipts, a comprehensive timeline of her affair documented with the precision of an engineering survey. Spa treatments on Tuesday afternoons when you were supposed to be in client meetings, hotel charges in 3 different cities that don't match any business trips on your calendar, and dinner receipts for 2 at restaurants you claimed you'd never been to. With each piece of evidence, Jenna seemed to shrink a little more. The confident woman who'd packed for this trip was disappearing, replaced by someone who looked cornered and desperate. "You've been planning this," she whispered. "For months. You're not the only one who can strategize, Jenna." She moved to the bed and sat down heavily, her head in her hands. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand that I'm not the fool you thought I was. I want you to know that every lie you told, every secret meeting you had, every time you came home smelling like his cologne, I noticed all of it. Luke, I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen." "Of course you didn't mean for this to happen. You meant to keep lying to me indefinitely while you figured out your exit strategy." I stood up and walked to the dresser, picking up the framed photo. "But here's the thing about lies, Jenna. They're like structural flaws. Eventually the whole building comes down." I opened the dresser drawer and pulled out the manila envelope I'd asked the hotel to place there along with the photo. Inside were divorce papers, already filled out and notarized, dated from 3 months ago. "You've had these for 3 months?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "I've been ready to end this marriage since August. I just wanted to choose the time and place." I gestured around the luxurious suite. "Seemed appropriate to do it here, where it really ended for you." She stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. "Luke, please, we can work this out. Marriage counseling, whatever you want." "What I want is for you to sign these papers. What I want is for you to be honest for once in the last year and a half. What I want is for you to admit that you checked out of this marriage long before I did." The silence stretched between us, broken only by the soft hum of the heating system and the distant sound of other guests in the hallway. Through the window, the lake stretched out like a sheet of gray glass, beautiful and cold and unforgiving. Finally, Jenna looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "What about Darren? What about him? Are you going to... Will you tell his wife?" I smiled, and something in that expression made her flinch. "Jenna, I'm not going to tell anyone anything. I don't have to." I pulled out my phone again and showed her the screen. An email, already composed and ready to send, with attachments that included every piece of evidence I'd gathered. The recipient list included Darren's wife, both of their HR departments, and several key people in their professional network. All I have to do is hit send. You wouldn't. Try me. She stared at the phone like it was a loaded weapon, which in a way it was. Everything she'd worked for, everything she'd built, everything she thought she was moving toward, all of it could disappear with one tap of my finger. What do you want me to do? I want you to choose, Jenna. Sign the papers and walk away with some dignity intact, or force me to make this choice for you, but either way, this marriage is over. She reached for the pen with shaking hands, and I knew I'd won. Not just the battle, but the war. The question now was whether she'd surrender gracefully or try to take me down with her. Knowing my wife, I suspected it would be the latter. Jenna signed the papers with the mechanical precision of someone in shock, her signature a pale shadow of its usual confident flourish. I watched her hands shake as she dated each page, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. There, she said, setting down the pen. Are you happy now? Happy isn't the word I'd use. I collected the papers and slipped them back into the envelope. Satisfied, maybe. Vindicated, definitely. She stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the lake with her arms wrapped around herself. What happens now? Now you call Darren and tell him it's over. All of it. The affair, whatever future you thought you had together, whatever plans you made while you were lying to me. Luke, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. You thought you could have it both ways. Keep me as your safety net while you explored your options with him. But safety nets only work if the person using them doesn't cut the ropes. Her phone buzzed with a text message, and she glanced at it reflexively. Her face went pale. Let me guess, I said. Darren wondering how your romantic anniversary weekend is going. She didn't answer, but she didn't need to. I could read the guilt in her posture, the way she held the phone like it might explode. Call him, I said. Now, tell him it's over. I can't just. You can and you will, because if you don't, I'm going to call him myself. And trust me, that conversation will be much more unpleasant for both of you. She looked at me like she was seeing a stranger, which was probably accurate. The Luke she'd married would never have orchestrated something like this. But that Luke had trusted his wife, believed in their marriage, assumed that love meant something, that Luke was gone, replaced by someone harder and more calculating, someone more like her, actually. With trembling fingers, she dialed Darren's number. I could hear it ringing through the speaker, and then his voice, smooth and confident. Hey, beautiful, how's the anniversary trip going? Is he buying the Reconciliation Act? Jenna's eyes met mine across the room, and I saw the moment she realized how completely she'd underestimated me. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about showing her exactly who she'd become. Darren, she said quietly, we need to talk. What's wrong? You sound weird. Luke knows. About us. About everything. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. When Darren finally spoke, his voice had lost all its smoothness. What do you mean he knows? He has photos. Evidence. He's been planning this for months. Photos? What photos? I held up my hand and Jenna looked at me questioningly. I mouthed the words, put it on speaker, and after a moment's hesitation, she complied. Hello, Darren, I said pleasantly. Luke Hanson. I don't think we've been properly introduced. Luke. Darren's voice was tight with controlled panic. Look, I think there's been some misunderstanding. No misunderstanding. I know exactly what's been going on. The question is what we're going to do about it. What do you want? I want you to stay away from my wife, permanently. No more texts, no more calls, no more secret meetings. As of right now, you two are done. You can't just... Actually, I can. See, I've been doing some research on you, Darren. Interesting stuff. Like how your divorce from wife number 2 isn't quite as final as you've been telling people. Like how some of those business trips you've been taking with Jenna weren't exactly authorized by corporate. Like how your expense account has some creative interpretations of what constitutes legitimate business entertainment. The silence stretched out long enough that I wondered if he'd hung up. You've been busy, he finally said. I'm thorough. It's what I do for a living. I walked over to stand next to Jenna, close enough that Darren could hear me clearly. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to end this relationship right now, tonight. You're going to delete Jenna's number from your phone, and you're going to find a way to work with her professionally without making this situation any more complicated than it already is. And if I don't? I smiled, though he couldn't see it. Then I start making some phone calls. Your wife, your current wife, might be interested to know how you've been spending your time. Your boss might have some questions about those expense reports. Hell, I might even take out an ad in the local paper. You'd be amazed what you can accomplish with a little creativity and a lot of motivation. You're bluffing. Am I? Jenna, show him the photo. She held up her phone, pointing the camera at the framed picture on the dresser. Through the speaker, I could hear Darren's sharp intake of breath. That's just the beginning, I continued. I have a whole collection. Professional quality prints, perfect for sharing with friends and family. Would you like me to start with your wife or your boss? Luke, listen. No, you listen. This ends now. Tonight. You walk away from my wife, you keep your mouth shut about this conversation, and maybe, I don't destroy your life the way you tried to destroy my marriage. The line went quiet, except for the sound of Darren's breathing. When he finally spoke, his voice was defeated. Fine. It's over. Say it to her. Let her hear it from you. Another pause. Jenna, I'm sorry. This was a mistake. We can't see each other anymore. I watched my wife's face crumble as she heard the words. Whatever fantasy she'd been living, whatever future she'd imagined with him, it was evaporating in real time. Darren, please. I'm sorry, he repeated, and then the line went quiet. Jenna stared at her phone like it had personally betrayed her. In a way, it had. All those secret messages, all those carefully hidden calls, they'd been her lifeline to a different life, and now that lifeline was cut. How does it feel? I asked quietly. How does what feel? Being abandoned. Having someone you trusted throw you away to save themselves. She turned to look at me, and there was something broken in her eyes. Is that what you think I did to you? I don't think it, Jenna. I know it. The only difference is, I saw it coming. She sank into the chair by the window, her head in her hands. What am I supposed to do now? Now you figure out how to rebuild your life without me in it, just like I've been doing without you. Luke, I know I made mistakes. Mistakes? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Jenna, you didn't make mistakes. You made choices, deliberate, calculated choices. You chose to lie to me every day for over a year. You chose to steal money from our joint account to fund your affair. You chose to plan a future with another man while sleeping in my bed. I never meant to hurt you. No, you just meant not to get caught. There's a difference. She was crying now, quiet tears that she wiped away with the back of her hand. Once upon a time, those tears would have broken my heart. Now they just felt like justice. The room is paid for through Sunday, I said, gathering my things. You can stay if you want, or you can leave. I don't really care anymore. Where are you going? Home, to start the process of untangling 8 years of shared life. I paused at the door. Oh, and Jenna, you might want to start looking for a new job. I have a feeling your current position is about to become uncomfortable. I left her there in the honeymoon suite, surrounded by the ruins of her carefully constructed lies. The elevator ride down seemed longer than the one up, and I found myself thinking about the physics of collapse, how structures that seemed solid could fail so completely once their weaknesses were exposed. The valet brought my car around, and Tommy, the college kid, gave me a concerned look. Everything okay, sir? You seem to be leaving early. Change of plans, I told him, handing over another generous tip. Sometimes the best-laid plans fall apart. As I drove away from the Lakeside Grand Resort, I caught a glimpse of the honeymoon suite in my rearview mirror. The lights were still on, and I could imagine Jenna sitting by the window, trying to figure out how her perfect plan had gone so wrong. But I didn't look back for long. I had work to do, loose ends to tie up, and a life to rebuild. The foundation was solid now. No more lies, no more deception, no more pretending that a marriage could survive when only one person was committed to it. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe clearly. The air tasted like freedom, sharp and clean and full of possibilities. The road stretched out ahead of me, leading back to a life that was finally completely my own. The house felt different when I returned Sunday evening. Cleaner somehow, like a fever had broken. I moved through the rooms methodically, removing traces of our shared life with the same precision I used for everything else. Wedding photos went into boxes, her clothes into suitcases, 8 years of accumulated compromise sorted into 2 distinct piles. My phone buzzed constantly with calls from Jenna, but I let them go to voicemail. I'd said everything I needed to say at the resort. Now it was time for action, not words. Monday morning brought the first real test of my resolve. I was in my office at Morrison Engineering, reviewing foundation specs for a new office complex, when my assistant knocked on the door. Luke, there's someone here to see you. Says it's personal. Darren Tate stood in my doorway like a man facing execution. He'd lost the confident swagger I remembered from company parties, replaced by the nervous energy of someone who'd finally realized he wasn't as untouchable as he'd thought. 5 minutes, I said, not looking up from my blueprints. He closed the door behind him and took the chair across from my desk without being invited. We need to talk. No, we don't. We had our conversation Saturday night. I thought we understood each other. This is insane, Luke. You can't just destroy people's lives because you're upset about your marriage. I set down my pencil and looked at him directly for the first time. Up close, Darren was less impressive than I'd expected. Good-looking in a generic way, with the kind of artificial confidence that came from expensive suits and a company credit card. The kind of man who'd never faced real consequences for his actions. I'm not destroying anything, I said calmly. I'm just revealing what was already there. Jenna loves you. This thing between us, it was just what? Just physical? Just temporary? Just something that happened to you instead of something you chose? I leaned back in my chair. You know what I think, Darren? I think you're exactly the kind of man who's always had other people clean up his messes. But this time, you're going to have to handle the consequences yourself. His face flushed red. You think you're so smart, don't you? Playing these games, manipulating people. I'm not manipulating anyone. I'm just giving people the information they need to make informed decisions. Like your wife, for instance. The color drained from his face. You said you wouldn't. I said I wouldn't if you ended things with Jenna. You did. So far, I'm keeping my word. I picked up my pencil again. But if you keep bothering me, if you try to contact my wife, if you make this situation any more complicated than it needs to be, then all bets are off. This isn't over. Yes, it is. You just haven't accepted it yet. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You're going to regret this. Probably. But not as much as you're going to regret underestimating me in the first place. After he left, I called my lawyer. Janet Morrison, no relation to my boss, was the kind of attorney who specialized in making problems disappear cleanly and permanently. I'd used her services when my father died, and she'd impressed me with her thoroughness and discretion. Luke, she said when I walked into her office that afternoon, I have to say, these are some of the most comprehensive divorce papers I've ever seen. You've been thorough. I had time to prepare. And your wife signed them willingly? She signed them. Whether she was willing is debatable. Janet raised an eyebrow but didn't press for details. That was one of the things I liked about her. She understood that sometimes the less you knew about how something was accomplished, the better. The financial arrangements are straightforward, she continued. Joint assets split 50-50, no alimony requested by either party, no children involved. This should be finalized within 60 days. What about the house? She's agreed to let you buy out her share at current market value, very reasonable, considering I had enough evidence to make her life extremely difficult if she decided to be unreasonable. But Janet didn't need to know that. There is one potential complication, she said, flipping through the papers. Her employment situation. If there are any issues with her job, it could affect her ability to maintain her current lifestyle. I don't think that's going to be a problem. Janet gave me a look that suggested she knew more than she was letting on, but again, she didn't press. Discretion was expensive, but it was worth every penny. That evening, I was having dinner at Murphy's Tavern when my brother Doug slid into the booth across from me. He looked like he'd come straight from the garage, still wearing coveralls that smelled like motor oil and honest work. So, he said, stealing a French fry from my plate, I heard you and Jenna are getting divorced. News travels fast in this town. Melissa Farrow's been telling everyone who'll listen that you ambushed Jenna at some fancy resort. Says you humiliated her in public. I took a sip of my beer. Melissa wasn't there. So, what really happened? I gave him the abbreviated version, enough to satisfy his curiosity without getting into the details that might complicate things later. Doug listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or shaking his head. Damn, he said when I finished. I always knew she was ambitious, but I didn't think she had it in her to cheat. Everyone has it in them, under the right circumstances. Jenna just found her circumstances. You seem pretty calm about all this. I've had time to process it. The hard part wasn't discovering the affair. It was accepting that my marriage was over. Doug signaled the waitress for another round. So what's next? Next, I rebuild. New house, maybe. Definitely new routines. It's amazing how much of your life gets tangled up with another person without you realizing it. You going to be okay? I considered the question seriously. Yeah, I think I am. For the first time in months, I feel like I'm moving forward instead of just reacting to other people's choices. We drank in comfortable silence for a while, watching the Monday night crowd filter in and out. Murphy's was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where secrets were currency and gossip was entertainment. By tomorrow, half the town would know the basic facts of my divorce. By the end of the week, they'd have invented details that were probably more interesting than the truth, but that was okay. Let them talk. I'd learned that the truth had a way of surfacing eventually, and when it did, people would remember who'd handled themselves with dignity and who'd made a spectacle of their personal drama. My phone buzzed with another call from Jenna. This time, I answered. "Luke, please, we need to talk." "We talked. You signed papers. What else is there to discuss?" "I made a mistake, a huge mistake. But we can fix this. We can go to counseling, work things out." "Jenna, there's nothing to work out. You made your choice when you decided to have an affair. I made mine when I decided to end our marriage." "But I love you." "No, you don't. You love the security I represented. You love having someone to fall back on when your other plans don't work out. But that's not the same thing as love." "That's not true." "Then why didn't you end things with Darren when you realized you wanted to save our marriage? Why didn't you come clean months ago? Why did it take getting caught for you to suddenly remember that you love me?" She didn't have an answer for that, or at least not one she was willing to say out loud. "The papers are filed," I continued. "In 60 days, this will all be official. You can spend that time fighting it, making things ugly and complicated for both of us, or you can spend it figuring out what you want your life to look like going forward. Your choice." I hung up before she could respond and turned off my phone. Doug was watching me with something that might have been admiration. "Cold," he said. "Practical," I corrected. "There's a difference." But as I drove home to my empty house, I wondered if there really was a difference, or if I'd just become someone I didn't entirely recognize. Someone harder, more calculating, less willing to give people the benefit of the doubt. Maybe that wasn't entirely a bad thing. Maybe the old Luke had been too trusting, too willing to assume the best about people even when the evidence suggested otherwise. Maybe this new version, the one who planned instead of hoped, who verified instead of trusted, was better equipped to handle the world as it actually was instead of how he wished it could be. Time would tell. But for now, I was content to be the man who'd seen the truth clearly and acted on it decisively. The man who'd refused to be a victim of someone else's choices. The man who'd won.